vision that is incompatible. From the other side of terror to behold, annihilation will be unavoidable. Every broken enemy will know that their opponent that they'll be invincible. Take a last look around while you're alive. I'm an indestructible master of war.
Born in 1860, Micah Bell III was raised in a family of petty criminals, the outlaw gene going as far back as his grandfather. Throughout his childhood, Micah would join the family business alongside his father, committing petty crimes which only grew in scale alongside himself. By 1877, at the age of 17, Micah and his father would go on the run for a double murder, leading to Micah joining forces with various other petty criminals. From his brother to outlaws across the country, Micah's depravity and list of crimes would only grow with time, eventually leading to his brother Amos cutting all contact from him. Eventually, in late 1898, Micah would encounter an infamous outlaw by the name of Dutch Van der Linde, whom Micah would save during a deal gone wrong, earning Micah his respect. Due to this, Micah would be accepted into the Van der Linde gang, a group of outlaws wanted across most of the United States. Though he would maintain the respect of Dutch, Micah would be largely disliked by the other members of the gang, most of whom saw him as reckless and argumentative. In mid-1899, Micah would propose a potential heist to the gang, plotting to rob a ferry, a plan which most of the gang objected to. However, Dutch approved of the plan, leading to the gang going through with a risky heist. Unfortunately for the gang, the heist would go terribly, resulting in the deaths of several of their members, with the survivors forced to retreat to the snowy mountains of Amberino in order to evade the law. In the mountains, Micah and the gang would settle in Coulter, an abandoned mining town. During this day, Micah would find information regarding a train that would travel through the area, seeing it as an opportunity for a heist. After this heist took place, the gang would leave Coulter and set up camp in Horseshoe Overlook, out of the snowy mountains yet still laying low. During this period, Micah would be sent out to scout around the area around camp, leading him to the town of Strawberry, where Micah would meet up with Norman, an old criminal associate of his. This reunion would quickly turn sour, however, resulting in a bar fight where Micah would kill two men, resulting in him being arrested. The Van der Linde gang being made aware of this, Dutch would send his most trusted enforcer, Arthur Morgan, to help Micah break free. And while not the worst thing Arthur has gotten himself roped into, Arthur still made the foolish choice of actually helping Micah escape. Upon leaving the jail, Micah would go on a killing spree, massacring the residents of Strawberry and any law which attempted to stop him, despite Arthur demanding that the two simply leave. Eventually, the gunfight would lead to Norman, whom Micah would kill, along with the man's wife, all for the sake of getting his guns back. After escaping the law, Micah would choose to lay low from the gang, not wanting to return to Dutch empty-handed, which would lead him and Arthur later robbing a stagecoach. After this, Micah would return to the gang. Though he would occasionally join in on heists, he mainly spent his time in Dutch's ear, gaining the leader's favour. Eventually, the gang would attempt a robbery on the Lemoyne National Bank, yet another disaster which would lead to more death among the gang's ranks, with the survivors forced to split and retreat for the time being. The bulk of the remaining gang would go into hiding, while Dutch, Arthur, and Micah would escape aboard a boat headed for the South Pacific. Unfortunately, the ship would encounter a powerful storm, causing it to sink and for the gang members aboard to wash up on the island of Guam. Soon after arriving, the gang would work alongside a rebel outpost on the island to fight against military troops stationed there. This would lead to them rescuing a ship captain, which would allow the group safe passage back to the United States. Shortly after arriving back in America, Micah would become an informant to the Pinkertons, a private detective agency hunting down the Van der Linde gang. This would lead to an assault on their hideout, which the gang barely managed to survive. After this, they'd be forced to find a new hideout, this time in the form of Beaver Hollow. During the gang's time there, Micah would become much more influential towards Dutch, carefully manipulating the leader into furthering the downfall of the gang. This would all come to a head when Micah would convince Dutch to assassinate Leviticus Cornwall, a business owner who Dutch had previously inadvertently robbed via the train heist in Coulter. After successfully killing Cornwall, the gang would be relentlessly pursued by the law, only causing tensions to rise amongst the gang's remaining members. Eventually, Arthur would find out about Micah's betrayal, confronting him in Beaver Hollow. Dutch, having spiraled so far into madness and influence at this point, would take Micah's side in the argument, which would lead to conflict. This conflict would be quickly interrupted, however, as the Pinkertons would attack their hideout, causing chaos amongst the group. During the attack, Micah would eventually confront Arthur, and the two would finally come to blows. Arthur, having Micah dead to rights, would barely be stopped by Dutch, who would only realise too late that Micah was the traitor all along, mere moments before Micah would finally kill Arthur. After this, Micah would go on to form his own gang, newspapers stating that Micah would go on to rival Dutch's own spree of crime during this time. Sometime around 1907, Micah would reunite with Dutch, the two deciding to form an alliance once again. Shortly after this, surviving members of the Vanderlyn gang John Marston, Sadie Adler, and Charles Smith would catch wind of Micah, discovering that he and his gang were situated in Mount Hagen. The trio would travel the mountain, fighting through Micah's gang, with John Marston being the one to finally confront Micah at Fort Hagen. The two would engage in a brief gunfight before Micah would take Sadie as a hostage, forcing John to step out and confront Micah directly. During this exchange, Dutch would also reveal himself, causing a standoff to occur between the three men. During the confrontation, Dutch eventually comes to his senses and shoots Micah, freeing Sadie and allowing John to deliver the finishing blow to Micah. Upon his death, Dutch would go back into hiding, and John would return home to his family, his revenge finally fulfilled. However, as one final middle finger to John, the discovery of Micah's corpse would lead to the Pinkertons discovering John's location, once again making him a target for the law. Little to nothing is known of Judge Holden's origins, though it is implied that his existence is of supernatural origin. In the Book of Blood Meridian, he is shown being active shortly after the American-Mexican War during the late 1840s. He is first seen accusing a priest of various crimes, charismatically enough to rouse the churchgoers into killing the priest. After this, the judge would encounter a gang of scalp hunters, the group spotting him out in the desert seemingly waiting for them, despite having never seen them before. Holden would join the group, helping them evade an attack from a group of Apaches. This assistance would prove Holden to be a useful member of the gang, earning the respect of their leader, John Joel Glanton. The group travels across the Americas, massacring towns in their journey, with Holden in particular slaughtering the most, often without consideration or care. After a solid year of killing, most of the Glanton gang would be killed in a gunfight with Native Americans, with only a handful of the gang surviving. Holden, amongst the survivors, would encounter and attack two other survivors, Tobin and the Kid. Yes, that's his name. Blood Meridian is weird. Holden would stalk the two, with them barely able to escape to San Francisco. Decades later, the Kid, now the man, would encounter the judge in a saloon, with Holden having not aged a day past when they last met. Later that night, Holden would drag the man away into an outhouse, with the specifics of what happened not explained, though it is described as extremely horrifying by those who come across the scene. After this, the judge is last seen dancing in the saloon, with the rest of the bar's patrons joining him, seemingly entranced, seeing him as a great favorite. As the judge dances, he laughs, he never sleeps, and claims that he will never die. Howdy everyone, I'm the Solar Spartan, here to bring you episode 3 of Versus Vortex, where today we'll be pitting Micah Bell from Red Dead Redemption against Judge Holden from Blood Meridian. I've actually got nothing to say along with this. With a surprisingly short intro, let's get started by comparing these two physically.
He's gay, Dutch. He's gay. No, I ain't gay. Why'd you say that? No. He's gay for you, Dutch. He only wants you.
At the time of Red Dead Redemption 2, Micah Bell was a 39-year-old man standing at 5'9" and weighing around 167 pounds. While not completely out of shape, Micah's physique is far from the fittest of the gang. He's noticeably less in shape than characters such as Arthur or John, showing that Micah is nowhere near as active as he could be in the gang. Regardless, we can still examine Micah's physical showings. In terms of strength, Micah has been able to outfight outlaws and lawmen alike, having killed 2 men in a bar fight, and physically contending with enemies when necessary in gameplay. His best strength feat by far is contending in a drawn-out fistfight with Arthur Morgan, being able to hurt Arthur with his bare hands. Keep in mind, Arthur is capable of surviving gunshots, bear attacks, explosions, and falling off of cliffs, and Micah was able to harm that same person with just his hands. It should be noted though that this was a while Arthur was suffering heavily under the symptoms of tuberculosis, and as such was nowhere near his physical peak when he fought Micah. Hell, it's even heavily implied that if Dutch hadn't interfered, Arthur would have still won the fight. Speed is slightly better overall, as Mike has been shown capable of running at the same pace as people like Arthur and John, who are able to evade gunfire and outpace most people on foot. Micah's performance in this category is further shown via his speed of his guns. Several times throughout Red Dead 2, Micah has been shown reacting and shooting fast enough to outpace most who try to combat. As after being ambushed, Micah was able to almost immediately shoot 3 men and run to cover. This is also seen in the final fight with John, as Micah is able to shoot fast enough to not even allow John the time to shoot back. Keep in mind, John has access to the Deadeye ability, which enhances his reaction and reflexes to the point where the bullets can appear slow to him. And Micah was able to outgun that. Durability is somewhat clear-cut, as he's been shown taking gunshots and continuing to fight, suggesting a high pain tolerance, though his best showing is taking blows from Arthur in their fight, with Arthur being strong enough to overpower wolves, knock out or even kill people with a punch, and crush people's necks with just his grip, which would require around 1,250 pounds of force, and Micah was able to survive hits from this very same Arthur. Though it should be noticed that Arthur was far out of his prime at this point in time, and was still managing to slightly overpower Micah. I also feel it's important to possibly mention the strongest aspect of Micah's physicality, that being his endurance. As I said before, he's been shown walking off gunshots, but this is taken even further when examining the final fight he has with both Arthur and John. Depending on the ending, Arthur manages to take out one of Micah's eyes in their fight, with Micah able to continue fighting through the pain. And in his fight with John, Micah takes a shot to the chest from Dutch, and up to several dozen shots from John, many of which were likely in vital areas such as the chest and head. And though this was ultimately what killed Micah, he did manage to remain conscious seconds after this onslaught, showing that while any amount of heavy artillery will put him down like any other person, Micah has the tolerance to stay in the fight for a while even after catastrophic damage. During the events of Blood Meridian, the judge would have been a humanoid male stated to stand around 7 feet tall, and is stated to possibly weigh around 24 stone, aka 336 pounds. This combination would be considered noticeably overweight, bordering slightly into the range of obesity, though with how active the judge is during the story and how physically powerful he appears to be, it can be assumed a great majority of this weight is in muscle. Speaking of muscle, his strength may very well be his most impressive physical aspect, as he's been shown capable of holding grown men in the air like ragdolls, is capable of lifting 100-pound rocks over his head and hitting a horse with it hard enough to crush its skull, and was effortlessly able to break a man's arm and crush their head before they had the time to react. His best strength feat comes from him carrying a howitzer cannon, as if it were a regular gun, with the average howitzer weighing just shy of 10,000 pounds. Speed is kind of open-ended, as most displays of Holden's speed don't really depict him moving all that quick on his own. They instead detail how he's able to appear in places before other people, as seen at the start of the book, where he leaves a tent and reaches a saloon before the 2 people who ran out of the tent before him, with the 2 not even seeing him leave the tent. He still managed to get to the saloon before either of them could. He's also managed to climb a volcano before an entire gang of outlaws, a gang which had already passed him on this very same path. It should also be noted that Holden does have one example of direct speed, that being when he was able to avoid a knife attack from another outlaw, managing to break the man's arm and crush their head before they could react any further. So while it's largely unexplained how fast the judge can move, I think it's fair to say he's surpassing any average person, with even the book noting that he has cat-like reflexes. Durability is where Holden surprisingly lacks, as not once during the events of the book has he ever mentioned being harmed. I don't mean in the sense that he's invulnerable, I mean he's never outright attacked or shown taking damage. You could argue this as being either a good or a bad showing, but to me it gives absolutely nothing. The best you can argue for Holden is a scene where he walks through fire, which could arguably be a durability feat, but it's far too little evidence to lean any which way. Therefore, I'll have to give the benefit of the doubt and say Holden is about as durable as the average person. Again, you could argue him one way or the other, but with how little there is to show for him, it's only reasonable to assume he's around human level. When comparing these two, it's only right to get the obvious out of the way. The obvious in question being strength, because dear fucking god is it not even close. The best direct strength feats we get from Micah is him carrying dead bodies over his shoulder, which, considering the average weight for an adult man at the time, would mean that Micah is capable of carrying around 150 to maybe 200 pounds over his shoulder. That's cute and all, but the judge is carrying cannons weighing around 10,000 pounds. He's carrying them like they're regular guns. I'd say it's fair to use these 2 feats as a good guess for their strength, as both methods of lifting would work the exact same muscles. For Micah to carry a person over his shoulder and for Micah to carry that cannon, both would need to utilize the strength from their arms, shoulders, back, core, and legs for support. This means that these feats involve the characters utilizing most of their body and strength, which gives a good gauge for what they're fully capable of. If you really want to buff Micah, you could compare him to Arthur's neck-crushing feat, which would still make Micah close to 10 times weaker than Holden. Keep in mind that Micah is shown numerous times being weaker than Arthur. Even on Arthur that's on death's door, he's still weak. He's still stronger than Micah. So at best he'd likely scale below any feats of strength that Arthur can pull off. As for speed, it's somewhat closer, as both display showings of moving faster than other outlaws can react. Now you could argue that this could go either which way, but I personally believe that both even each other out. Micah has performed greater speed feats while in gunfights, while Holden has been shown travelling faster, to the point where teleportation is a genuine point of discussion. And while Holden having better travel speed is good and all, I'd argue Micah's better combat speed is going to be more beneficial in this engagement, which is why I declare speed of tie. If you force me to make up my mind on it, I'd say Micah gets the slightest edge. But again, it's so close between both that it's effectively even. Durability is surprisingly where Micah takes the advantage. To put it frank, we don't actually see the judge take any damage, which you could argue is a positive, but here it just gives us jack shit to compare him to. The most we can do is be nice and assume he has human level durability. Micah on the other hand is able to shrug off getting shot several times, which gives him the edge by default. It should also be noted that Micah is able to survive several gunshots and continue to fight, and that would give him the edge in endurance as well. However, overall stamina would fall into Holden's favour, as throughout the course of Blood Meridian he has not shown eating, sleeping, aging, or so much as tiring, suggesting a supernatural level of stamina that Micah simply doesn't come close to. Therefore, it's for these reasons that I'll be granting Holden the edge in physical capabilities. While Micah matches and outdodges the judge in more ways than you'd initially expect, Holden's advantages simply outweigh those of Micah's. And while Micah narrowly outdoes him in certain categories, the areas Holden does excel in are the ones that he excels in by a country mile.
What are you even from? You look like that big mouse from Flushed Away.
Pretty sure that's a rat. No, I'm from Blood Meridian. I know you ain't read it. Just watch this video.
Give me 1 second. Give me 5 hours.
Micah will be bringing 3 weapons into this fight. The first 2 being his twin custom double-action revolvers. These guns have a maximum range of around 300 feet, and an ammo capacity of 6 rounds before needing to be reloaded. While the stereotypical weapon of the Western gunslinger, it should be noted that Micah's tendency to dual-wield these guns slightly hinders their accuracy. The third weapon Micah will be bringing is his knife, while not specified, looks most similar to a prison shank, which Micah likely made himself during his time in the Strawberry Jail. Considering we are never told outright in game, and shanks can be made from pretty much anything if put in the right hands, we'll assume that from the look of it, the blade of Micah's knife is made from glass and is around 6 inches long. And while rarely used, we can see from the final fight with Arthur that Micah is somewhat skilled with the blade, being able to contend with and even kill Arthur with it. The judge will be bringing 4 weapons into this fight, the first 2 being his Colt Dragoon revolvers. These are a pair of 1848 Army revolvers used primarily as the firearm for men during the American Indian Wars and American Civil War. They have an effective firing range of 210 feet and an ammo capacity of 6 rounds before needing to be reloaded. These guns fire 44 caliber projectiles and possess a muzzle velocity of around 1,100 feet per second, making them extremely powerful guns. This is best shown in the book, when the guns are first introduced and tested by the Glanton gang, in which its shots are shown powerful enough to render animals such as birds and cats completely destroyed, leaving not so much as a corpse behind. It's also shown completely decimating those who are shot by it, effectively making these firearms a death sentence at close range. Holden's third weapon is his hunting knife, which is primarily used for scalping and skinning, though it can still be used offensively if need be. The average hunting knife possesses a blade length of around 5 inches, making it more suited to slicing as opposed to stabbing. Holden's final weapon is the howitzer cannon, which weighs around 10,000 pounds and can fire up to 9-pound explosive shells up to 3,000 feet. Given how this weapon was designed to destroy small buildings and enemy defenses, it is no exaggeration to say that a direct shot from the howitzer would effectively reduce an opponent to what could best be described as chunky salsa. It should also be noted that given the judge's ability to carry this cannon like a regular gun, it's fair to say that he could also use it in close range, similar to a club. Comparing these two in terms of arsenal, at first it seems like a complete sweep in Holden's favour.
Which it is.
But in all credit where it's due, Micah has shown greater accuracy with his weapons, as he's been able to kill multiple targets in rapid succession, which is skill that Holden simply doesn't display. Also, if the fight somehow came to fisticuffs, Micah has a slightly better knife, being a solid inch longer, which it makes a difference, guys, trust. In terms of pure firepower, however, Holden undeniably takes the edge. Don't get me wrong, a well-placed shot from either would most definitely be fatal, but while Micah's shots are incapacitating people, Holden's are making them completely past tense, completely liquefying animals and people that get shot by him. And it's for these reasons that I'll be grounding Holden for the slightest edge in weapons and equipment.
Looks like Micah's gay. You know what we do to gays, boy. Oh no, come on, I'm not gay, I swear! Yeah, we'll see about that, Micah. No, not the gay zone!
Welcome to what the cool kids call the slander of Micah Bell. So shortly after Micah joins the Vandalin gang, he proposes a potential heist to them, this being the robbing of the Blackwater Ferry. All in all, this plan goes really well, for a grand total of 5 seconds. Long story short, the heist was a complete disaster, and resulted in the gang having to retreat to the mountains just to evade capture. And that was after 3 members had been killed in the heist, and 1 extra had been arrested. After leaving the mountains, the gang decided to lie low for a while, so Micah, in his infinite wisdom, gets into a bar fight, kills 2 people, and gets arrested. What happens to the best of us, I guess. After Arthur goes all the way to Strawberry to break Micah out, Micah then proceeds to go on a killing spree, blowing the town's inhabitants and lawmen away. After this, Micah decides to rob a carriage in order to bring money to Dutch, a robbery which he needed Arthur to help pull off. But we'll give him this one, we'll give him the credit for this one. After this, there's Micah talking Dutch into meeting with Colm O'Driscoll, Dutch's lifelong enemy. This meeting actually went well. For everyone except fucking Arthur, who gets captured and nearly killed by the O'Driscolls during this meeting. You know, Arthur, the guy pulling all the weight around the gang, basically carries the whole group. Then there's the Saint Denis bank robbery, which left the gang down 2 more members, another arrest, and caused it to split temporarily. One half having to go into hiding, while the other had to flee the country. After their return, Micah basically becomes an informant for the Pinkertons, meaning that I won't dock points for him sabotaging the gang, as that was effectively his plan at this point. But even when batting for the different team, Micah still managed to fuck it up. By the end of chapter 6, just about everyone knew that he was a rat. And then after that, Micah still had the bright idea to try and team up with Dutch. You know, the guy he ratted on. Now to be fair, he was doing a passable job at manipulating Dutch before. But literally the last time he saw Dutch before this point was when he fucking killed Dutch's basically Dutch's son right in front of him. Now, this isn't to say that Micah is a complete moron. He's just nowhere near as intelligent as he'd like people to think he is. You can say that he's a half decent manipulator, but only half decent. Sure, he was able to string Dutch along well enough to stay in the game, but before things had went to shit and Dutch was still in his right mind, Micah had little to no luck getting in his way. This is especially obvious when you consider fellow gang members like Hosea, Arthur, and John, who had been able to see through Micah's bullshit for most of the game. At best, you can argue that Micah's a decent schemer that is in way over his head, and gets far more authority than he's capable of accounting for. From his very first scenes in Blood Meridian, the judge is shown to be extremely intelligent. Throughout the course of the story, Holden is shown proficient in knowledge and skills in the fields of biology, geology, history, marksmanship, botany, art, and law, just to name a few. He's shown extensive fluency in languages such as English, Spanish, German, and several Native American dialects. He's managed to use his intelligence to overcome life or death scenarios for both him and his gang, such as when he lures the group into a cave and uses said cave's sulfur to make gunpowder. He's been shown to be a very skilled manipulator as seen in his very first scene, in which Holden interrupts the sermon of a priest, accuses the priest of abhorrent crimes, and manages to convince the churchgoers to kill the priest. After this, the townsfolk ask the judge about the validity of his claims, only for Holden to admit that he'd never seen or known of the man before that point. The crowd finds humor in his actions and buys him drinks. As a matter of fact, the pursuit of knowledge ties in heavily to the judge's character, as he states one of his desires is to acquire knowledge on all that exists. As he says,
"Whatever in creation exists without my knowledge, exists without my consent."
holy fucking sweep, Batman. While, like I said, Micah isn't an idiot, he may as well be one when compared to the judge. Micah can be argued as a decently skilled criminal with an ego that causes him to slip up consistently. While Holden's skill as a criminal goes hand in hand with his skill as a lawman, both of which outdo anything Micah could ever dream of scheming up. Along with that, Holden is a better manipulator than Micah. While both managed to weasel their way into their respective criminal gangs, Holden managed to successfully tear that gang down, while also convincing countless others to his flock with ease. In short, whether it's a competition of criminal activity or of their silver tongues, Micah couldn't even hope to match Holden in any conceivable way. And it's for that reason I'll be granting Holden the edge in combat skills and tactics.
Does God hear our cries?
What?
Or is he like some migrant star, blinking through the tendrils of the night's infinite dark?
Do you really think a book about the horrible violence in the American Southwest in the 1800s is really a great thing to base your personality around?
War!
We opened to the town of Strawberry, a secluded little town known mainly for labors of logging and gold. The day was quiet, work running smoothly and seemingly not a trouble in the world. Said trouble sat in the town's jail. Isolated in a downstairs cell, locked away in the cold darkness like some fairy tale beast left to rot as to not plague humanity, was Micah Bell. The outlaw sat in his cell, hunched upon himself and his hands clasped as he sat, positioned as though he were either a man in scheming or some grossly misshapen troll. Both would be flattering titles for a man like him. In that darkness, a light pierced through. The creeping light from upstairs shone upon a pale bulb which now stood across from Micah, bringing slight illumination to the dark of the basement. The milk-white dome looked down at Micah with wrinkled eyes and a yellow-tinted smile. Its throat and made itself known, now recognizable as the head of a tall man, an incredibly tall man. Standing before Micah, head nearly touching the roof, was a large, pale man donning a black, oil-slickered coat and a wide hat. The man's face was serene, oddly childlike, round and wrinkled, with not a hair upon the entire canvas, chin, lip, eyes, and scalp completely bald. The figure outdrew a hand as if to shake Micah's, despite the bars of the cell. The pale hand oddly small in comparison to the rest of the giant's body. "Good evening. Mr. Bell, is it?" Micah's eyes widened as he took in the man, large and unusual. The outlaw feigned a chuckle as he formulated a response. "Well, look at you, big man. Guessing you're one of the law's boys, come to hang me?" The pale man chuckled heartedly in response, before speaking yet again. "Man of the law, you are correct, but not here to have you swing." Micah was silent, unsure of what to make of the situation. He awaited clarification, which came in the form of jangling keys, which rattled against the door to unlock his cell. The cell door slid open and Micah stood slowly, untrusting and cautious, like a stray animal. "You're free to go, Micah." Micah stood upright, but still hesitant, far from the door as if a trap were waiting on the other side. "Says who? You some sort of judge or something?" "Why, yes indeed, though you may call me Holden." The judge took a step back from the doorway and outstretched a hand to Micah once again, beckoning Micah as if he were an animal, which Micah soon obeyed. The outlaw took slow steps out of his cell, his cautious showing fading quickly once out of the cell. With a throaty laugh and a newfound swagger in his step, Micah climbed the steps of the basement, with the judge following behind. The two made it to the jail's office and passed Sheriff Henley on their way out, slumped over his desk as if in sleep. Micah paid no mind to the sheriff as he smugly made his way to the front door, not even taking the time to notice the blood which pooled onto the desk, originating from Henley's slit throat. The two men left the jail and embraced the outside world, Micah taking in a deep breath of fresh air which he sorely missed down in that dank cell. The judge smiled as he eyed Micah, as if he were waiting for his next words. "It's good to finally be out of there. Never thought I'd be grateful to see the outside of this damn town. Indeed. Such a victory calls for celebration. How about a drink down yonder? The judge pointed in the direction of what Micah presumed to be a saloon, motioning for the outlaw to follow him. The two walked together in the direction of the saloon, Micah walking ahead of Holden, eager to enjoy his first drink as a free man, while Holden walked slowly and deliberately, making sure to get a good distance from Micah. When he was roughly halfway across the trek, as Micah just passed by the front entrance of Strawberry's hotel, he froze for a moment. Wait a damn minute. Ain't this a dry town? Bell muttered more so to himself than to the judge, who had already reached into his pocket and retrieved a large pistol, raising it and steadying the shot before loading. If not for Micah's honed senses and rat-like reflexes, his brain matter would have painted the doors of the hotel. Fortunately, the sound of the gun cocking set him off, and he leapt to one side just in time to avoid the bullet. The stray bullet roared past the outlaw and landed upon the poor receptionist working behind the counter at the hotel, hitting him with such force that the entire right side of his head seemingly evaporated in a miniature firework of gore. Such an eruption caused the hotel's residents to begin flocking out in a haste, Micah taking the opportunity to run inside and take cover behind the front desk.
What's gotten into you? Having second thoughts but let me out?
Holden maintained his ever-present grin as he spoke. You see, Bell, my talents end not at jurisdiction. I'm also something of a scalp hunter. In the midst of the monologue, Micah reached over towards the dead receptionist and rummaged their pockets, seizing their pistol. It's my understanding that you're running with the infamous Vandalin gang, is that not correct? Like a vulture, Micah used the few seconds given to completely raid the corpse, now loading his new firearm with freshly stolen ammunition.
Figured freedom would have a price. What do you want to know about the gang?
Despite the offer, Holden did not entertain such a barter. That won't be necessary. I'm simply here for you. Your head alone goes for $1,000. Too good to pass up. Micah chuckled to himself, chambering his gun before once again taking cover beside the hotel's doorway, awaiting the perfect moment to strike.
$1,000 for me. I should have turned myself in.
Quite the generous offer, and I plan on collecting.
Enough with the fancy talk. You want me dead? Quit cowering and come and get me.
The door swung open with a hard kick, Micah leveling his revolver and taking aim, all the while the judge did the same.
Death is but a dance, shall we?
The two shot in unison, both narrowly missing the other. The bullet soaring towards the judge landed upon the dome of his hat, causing it to fly off, while the bullet intended for Micah hit the doorway, narrowly to his left, causing a window-sized hole to explode into the building's entrance. Like a startled animal, Micah turned tail following the explosion, running down the stretch of buildings and pushing past townsfolk who had all heard the commotion. He fired blindly at the judge, and with uncanny agility for such size, Holden sidestepped each bullet flawlessly and with grace, almost as if each evasion were the moves of a dance. The judge readied another shot as Micah ran, his steady eye keeping track of Micah through the panicking crowd. He fired the gun, having Micah dead to rights, if not for the outlaw taking hold of a man and using the bystander as a human shield. The bullet erupted through the innocent man with such force that even Micah felt shell-shocked from the blast, his whole body shaking as he tossed the body aside. Just as he looked up, Micah caught the sight of the enormous judge yet again, this time joining him at the storefronts, so tall that he had to hunch like some wild beast in order to fit. The judge swung a hand in the manner one would just want to fly, Micah barely ducking the strike as he reached for his knife, thankful that he had tucked it away when he was arrested. Holden reeled back for a wide punch, with such a force that his fist tore through the store's wall like clay. Micah especially thankful that he had managed to dodge yet again. In the split-second struggle of Holden yanking his arm from the wall, Micah ripped his knife from its holster and slammed it into the judge's forearm, ripping the material of his coat, but not quite drawing blood. Micah attempted to rip the knife through the length of Holden's arm, his choice coming back to bite him as the judge released his arm from the wall, the force of such an act sending Micah flying out onto the dirt road. Just as luck, a brewing storm commenced soon after the outlaw hit the ground, his dirt landing quickly turning into sopping wet mud, which painted his face and outfit. Micah turned in the mud, caking his back in grime, but letting off another set of shots the judge's direction. The judge, with the same agility as before, weaved between the bullets, dancing between them in the light and shadow of the storefront. Micah, finally gaining his footing, fled once again, running from Holden in a desperate sprint similar to that of a scurrying rodent. The judge grinned wickedly as he stepped out from the shade, turning to instead grab his hat as opposed to chase Micah down. He tipped it to one side to chase the rain from it before placing it back onto his head. Turning to face Micah, the judge was met by the thundering of countless horses, a squadron of the law already coming along to break up the commotion. The officers parked a wagon in front of the town's bridge, creating a barrier between Holden and Micah. The men split off into two groups, one pursuing Micah and the other pursuing Holden. The squadron readied their weapons at the two, ready to fire at any moment. "We have you surrounded. Drop your weapons and turn yourself in, or we will use force." As if to the beat of a drum, the two outlaws blasted hot lead into the officers before them, finally making successive hits as each bullet nailed headshot after headshot, be it at the officers or at their steeds. Holden's pistol discharged and landed upon a horse in the crowd of police, the mare's head exploding at the snout like a burst watermelon. The dead horse writhed wildly like a wounded Medusa, instinctually kicking and flailing in place, causing the other horsemen to be felled from their steeds, their guns falling separate from them. The judge approached the lawman in stride, grabbing the closest man and swinging him by the leg like an ape, using him as a weapon to beat the second man who barely began to stand up. The two collided with such a force that they died instantly, their bodies crumbling like wet tissue paper as they landed on the dirt. Meanwhile, Micah made his way past onslaughts of lawmen, his accuracy finally shining as he laid waste to each in his path, shooting many men before they could even depart from their horses. He ducked through the hail of bullets and retreated behind a stray wagon, taking potshots at the lawmen in his way. Just a clearing is all he'd need. He could see the house from where he stood. It was barely 20 feet away. He turned back to check on his opponent and caught sight of no such thing. The once bustling area was now desolate, devoid of life and instead populated by dead horses and lawmen. As Micah spun back around to the enemy at his front, he found his previous target. The wall of the wagon beside him burst as another bullet slammed through it, sending splinters flying into Micah's face. Holden turned his gun towards the group of officers, diverting their attention from Micah. Micah, sputtering and wiping the shards of wood from his face, saw his opportunity and promptly took it. He ran out from his cover, praying that the law didn't turn back around, or God forbid, Holden turned his sights back onto him. Micah bolted to the front door of the house and threw himself against it, pounding with all of his weight in a desperate attempt to catch the residents' attention, or to break down the door, whichever came first.
"Skinny! Open the door!"
The door rattled with each strike, verging more and more on breaking off his hinges, the sound of such an action causing some of the lawmen to revert their attention back to Micah, causing the panic strike to grow even more anxious.
"Skinny! Get out here!"
In the gunfight between the judge and the law, an officer fresh out of bullets threw his gun to the side and retrieved a stick of dynamite from his pack. At the precise moment that the explosive left his hand, Holden's aim focused on it and tracked it perfectly in midair, shooting the stick and causing it to prematurely erupt. The explosion hit right in front of the lawmen, all of them perishing in the blast, and the resulting explosion causing a nearby building to catch fire. Micah, slamming into the door from the force of the blast, was practically bashing the door with his hands to open it.
"Skinny!"
It ain't Skinny, Micah, it's Norman. Oh.
The second that the door creaked open, Micah pushed his way inside and blasted Skinny in the face. He pushed the lifeless body away as he forced his way into the house, slamming the door shut behind him. At this point, the judge, having disposed of the remaining lawmen, slowly approached the house, closing in like a predator closing the distance between a trapped prey. As he approached, Holden picked up on the sounds of screaming from inside, the shouts of Micah and those of a woman. A muffled gunshot brought silence to the house, which failed to divert Holden's attention away from a new point of interest. Holden took a moment to reach into his coat pocket and retrieve a cigar, raising his arm to the balcony of the nearby alight building and using the flames to light it. Taking a long drag, Holden exhaled and switched his route from the house to the nearby monument as he awaited the outlaws' next move. Micah, now properly armed, made his way back out to the house entrance, taking a moment to prepare as he charged for the door. With a deep breath and a swift kick, Mike made a show of opening the door, stepping out of the house and spinning his twin revolvers before taking aim at where he last saw Holden. Confused to be pointing towards nothing, Bell turned to the right and caught sight of the judge, leaving him more perplexed than before. Where Holden stood, a monument of a howitzer cannon sat bolted into the ground. Holden, with the same effort as lifting a branch, ripped the cannon out from the ground and swung it show-offishly in his hands in a manner similar to juggling a club. Taken aback by the display, Micah hesitated on his trigger pull. With a moment's delay, Micah unloaded both his revolvers, while Holden used a second of hesitation to ready himself. He swung the cannon to guard his chest, with each of the 12 bullets pitifully sputtering against the steel as if they were pellets from a toy gun. As he blocked, the judge took large strides in approaching his bounty, Micah barely getting time to reload before having to dodge. Holden lunged forwards and swung the howitzer at Micah, and luckily for Micah, narrowly missed. The cannon slammed through the front wall of the house, destroying it with ease and exposing the shelter to the outside world. Micah leapt out of the way and ran from the house, turning briefly to line up shot after shot, a few managing to actually clip the judge. Running down the path he had originally fled, Micah realized all too late that the pathway was blocked by the police wagon. With nowhere else to run, Micah turned around just in time to spot the judge, tall and looming, the howitzer above his head and ready to swing down. Micah managed to sidestep the colossal man's strike, weaving to the right and taking a swing of his own. His dirty hands stained Holden's coat, yet drew little more than a sharp exhale as the judge lined up another swing. With prompt time to see the attack coming, Micah dodged with a greater agility than before, giving him just enough time to withdraw his knife and lunge forward. Due to the sheer size difference, Micah's raised arms barely reached up to the judge's chest, which proved to be a benefit. Cutting through the rough leather, Micah's blade slammed into Holden's chest, blood mixing into the dirty nice layer of mud, the judge's expression wavering for a moment as his chest was ripped open, his grin still ever present, but more wild. His eyes furious and teeth gritted with pained fury, the stained yellow brick sandwiched the cigar tighter, threatening to break it apart like a twig. Staggering back slightly from the blow, Holden's fury came out in the open as he swung once again. Taken off guard and too slow to react, Micah's smug face made personal contact with over 9,000 pounds of steel, the staggering force causing his very skull to rattle. A lucky outcome as opposed to completely taking his head off. Micah's senses spun, an intense vertigo overcoming him as warm, viscous liquid dripped out from the orifices of his face. He staggered backwards and made contact with the wagon once again, forgetting once again that he was trapped. At his breaking point and his back figuratively and literally against the wall, Micah snarled as he ripped his guns from their holsters and ran right into the judge, embracing the giant in a tight grip. Both revolvers pressed against Holden's sides, Micah unloaded all 12 in succession, each shot sending spurts of blood flying out onto the ground below. Now bleeding profusely, the judge's intimidating stature faltered, his colossal frame dropping to one knee, though even while kneeling, Holden still looked to eye level with Micah, with Bell taking great pleasure in finally being on the same level as the judge. Walking up with a similar swagger to when he had first encountered the judge, Micah cackled through strained breaths. He had finally toppled the beast, and now he was on top of the world. Well. What was all that you were saying about collecting my bounty? The judge remained silent, his grin, though pained, held firm. Even his cigar remained wedged in between his teeth, still lit as Holden exhaled the smoke through shaky breaths of his nostrils. The legs of his pants began to dye a deep shade of crimson, the cocktail of blood and grime staining him, with the holes in his sides causing dark tints of red to seep out onto his coat. What? Now you've decided to finally shut up? Between strained puffs of his cigar, Holden began to slightly chuckle, first noticeably quiet, but soon erupting into muffled laughter, much to Micah's infuriation. Bell raised both his revolvers, pushing them close to Holden's face, the barrel of each threatening to unload upon his skull. Damn you! Holden, with a smile which stretched to the furthest reaches of his face, spoke, the last fiery chunk of the cigar falling from his mouth. Yes, many have. As the cigar fell, its flames met with the wick of the cannon, the wick burning away and retreating to ignite the fuse. Successfully lit, the cannon let out a sudden chugging noise, indicating that the breech was loaded. Primed and ready to fire, the howitzer expelled a mighty puff of ignition and smoke before sending a mortar flying out of the barrel which Micah stood mere inches away from. The mortar made direct contact with Micah, sending him slamming right into the wagon before the shell exploded. Upon the shell's detonation, a thick cloud of smoke and shrapnel flooded the path, shrouding the entire area in smog. Holden, unfazed by the shockwave, steadied himself back to his feet. With a moment to gain his bearings, Holden dragged the empty howitzer to the end of the bridge and tossed it into the water below, the tool having served its purpose. Wiping the blood from his legs, Holden walked into the clearing smoke, reaching into his coat pocket and retrieving his own blade. Discoloring the mud like a wine stain on a white dress, the messy remains of Micah's being lay face first in the mud, now a healthy mix between both dirt and viscera. Now devoid of what could be considered a midsection, Micah's still bleeding guts lay sprawled out among the mud. his lower body out of the equation, for both of his legs occupied spaces several feet apart from one another. Despite the carnage which made up Micah's being, he still by some cruel miracle seemed to be breathing, a fact which the judge took delight in. Staining his boots with the remains of his fallen enemy, Holden reached down and grabbed Micah by his dirty blonde hair, pulling him out of the mud by his locks. The disembodied outlaw in one hand and the knife in another, Holden grinned as he pressed the blade against Micah's hairline. With steady and precise hands, Holden glided the knife along the base of Micah's scalp, starting with just behind his ears before working its way to the front. With a newfound energy and vigor, Micah screamed as the skin was separated from his head, close enough to death's door to be powerless, but still very much alive enough to feel every aching moment that Holden put him through. Slashing through the rough skin of the forehead like butter, Holden cut through to the other side of Micah's head, eventually reaching the back of the neck. Upon cutting around the full length of the scalp, Holden allowed the body to drop unceremoniously to the ground. The now bald and red raw head left to drown in the mud as Micah finally fell silent. Retreating the knife back into his pocket, Holden held the grimy hairline in his hand for a moment, seemingly observing his trophy. As he looked around at the battleground, a hearty laugh bellowed from deep within his being, the cacophony of roaring fire, thundering rain, and devilish laughter. It was something to behold. Though the judge did not address his fallen enemy, his ever-present grin remained firm, in appreciation for a good dance. And as the judge strode off, though the fire and rain would subside, the echoing of his cackling would sing out amongst the mountains, in the snow and rain, the desert and foliage, in light and in shadow. The judge's roaring chorus would emanate. They, like he, would never die. In the early morning upon Horseshoe Overlook, the gang was surprisingly deep in slumber. At sunrise, most of the Vandalin gang would be out of bed and ready to start the day. But today, the whole group took themselves to enjoying a well-deserved sleep-in. As such, they were unaware of the uninvited presence which made itself welcome amongst their ranks. Pearson, being the first to awake, was the first to see it. Then Hosea, then Dutch, then one by one the whole gang was wide awake. At the outskirts of Dutch's tent, tearing up to the very roof curtain of the structure, was the judge, clean and pristine, and smiling hideously like a gargoyle. The pale giant stood before the camp donation box, opening the tiny wooden structure with surprising gentleness. He then reached into his satchel, retrieving a dirty dark blonde tuft of hair, resembling some kind of macabre wig. He held the scalp outwards and allowed it to drop into the box, slamming the box shut before turning to make his leave. Facing the rest of the camp, Holden loomed over the entire gang, some of them peeking from their tents, while others were still getting out of bed, all silent in the wake of the beast. Holden, without missing a beat, simply smiled and began to walk, his footsteps gentle and silent. As he made his leave, the giant passed Abigail and John's tent, catching a peek at little Jack Marston, the judge's grin growing ever so wider upon sight of the boy. Finally leaving the outskirts of camp, the gang remained silent as they watched on, keeping their gaze fixed until the judge was finally out of sight, now at one with the wilderness. With the strange man gone and the entire camp now wide awake, order soon restored among the group. Everyone going about their daily tasks, Dutch took the honors of opening the box, peeking down at the present left inside. Stifling a gag as the smell of rotten flesh and dried blood hit him, Dutch closed the box just as quickly as he had opened it. Arthur Morgan, now going about starting his day, saw Dutch's distress and came along to inspect the contents of the box. Taken aback by the sight and stench before him, Arthur grabbed the wretched locks and let out a befuddled chuckle. Well, ain't that just generous? And with that, I declare Holden, the judge, the winner. Now, despite what the scores might suggest, this was an extremely close bout. In fact, both fighters were evenly matched in a lot of unexpected ways. Getting the obvious out of the way, strength wasn't even close. Comparing Micah carrying people over his shoulders to Holden carrying that cannon, the judge comes out to around 50 times stronger. Hell, if we compare Micah to Arthur's neck-crushing feats, he'd still be at least 10 times weaker than the judge. Keep in mind, Micah was shown being weaker than Arthur while he was minutes away from dying, so we know for a fact that Micah wouldn't even scale to this level of strength to begin with. But let's say we're generous and give Micah that sort of strength. A 10 times strength gap is still crazy to go up against. For a simple comparison, the strength difference between a human and a silverback gorilla is around 10 times. These are the odds Micah is going up against. Now imagine if that gorilla was hyper intelligent to the point that it made Micah look primitive. Whether it's general knowledge, combat, or even skills at being a criminal, Holden sweeps to an unimaginable degree. And it honestly isn't even a surprise. One of Holden's main goals is to acquire all worldly knowledge. He's likely been studying for as long as he's been alive, which we can't even begin to put an estimate on. And we see that intelligence used in the midst of conflict, as seen by Holden luring a group of attackers into a cave and using said cave sulfur to make gunpowder and blow his enemies away. In short, Holden has the strength to effectively rip Micah apart, and him being able to think 3 steps ahead means that he'd be able to get in close enough to do that. But don't think that Micah is completely helpless in this fight, as he does hold some advantages. Starting off most surprisingly, Micah has shown better feats of durability than the judge. This comes down to the fact that we never actually see the judge get injured at all during Blood Meridian, while we've seen Micah walk off punishment that would kill just about any person. Now, you could argue that this is all due to Holden's supernatural nature, or that he's simply skilled enough to avoid being damaged. But shut up, let this slippery rat bastard have something, we need to fucking bump this list. And speaking of being a slippery rat bastard, that would actually prove to be one of Micah's biggest advantages in this fight. Sure, we've seen the judge hold his own in gunfights, but Micah is out here shooting several people in the blink of an eye, and even competing with characters like Arthur and John, both of which have draw speeds and reaction times with that border on superhuman. While yes, Holden's travel speed is crazy to the point of where it's theorized to be teleportation, Micah being able to aim and shoot faster than him is going to be a major problem, especially in a shootout. And on the topic of Micah's weapons, he actually has the better melee option of the two, as his makeshift knife is an inch longer than Holden's blade. Come to think of it, between his better survivability and better combat speed, Micah has the big advantages that would be most helpful in a gunfight like this. It's a damn shame that he still gets bodied regardless. Even if Micah has better durability and better combat speed, Holden still has the tools to put him down, and the intelligence to use them effectively. While Micah's guns are able to put holes in people, Holden's guns completely liquefy them. And don't even get me started on the howitzer. One good swing from that could likely take Micah's head off, God forbid the judge actually shoots Micah with it. In short, while Micah held the advantage where it most counts, it would only be to hold off the inevitable, as Holden's overwhelming strength, superior weapons, and incomprehensible intelligence were more than enough to seal Micah's fate. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if I got anything wrong, feel free to correct me. I've been the Solar Spartan, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Arthur! Arthur! You going to get me out of here?
You need to hang up that computer call. Come over here and kiss me on my hot mouth. I'm feeling romantic.